Stop it. I actually can say that, though, that every man who has ever been happily married, even for a brief period of time, probably loves to think his is the best wife ever. I was blissfully married to Wendy for 50 years, and she was indeed the best wife a man could ask for. I use the word was since she is no longer among us. Her diagnosis of a rare non-Hodgkin's lymphoma a little less than a year ago was simply the most recent in a lengthy history of health problems that had dogged her throughout her life. The doctor stated that she would require surgery in order to survive the remainder of her chemotherapy after discovering that she had pockets of infection all throughout her belly, primarily in the area surrounding her big intestine. The doctor said that although it would be hazardous, if all went according to plan, she would be able to continue her chemotherapy and beat the cancer. Yet nothing went as to plan. Doctors had to perform much more than just remove a portion of her big intestine since the virus had spread farther than doctors had initially thought. Despite their best efforts, she never made it through the procedure. Although we both understood coming into this that there was a risk she would not make it, I was distraught when they broke the news to me. We also understood that without the procedure, there was no prospect for her survival. So we made the decision to try it. I had just arrived back at our house after the funeral, which was a sad but well-attended event because everyone who knew her cherished her. I picked out our photo album and relaxed back in my recliner, reflecting on the life we had together. Strange as it may seem, I actually met Wendy before I met Marcy, my first wife. I had recently been posted to my unit in the Southern California Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton in 1967. 311 Infantry was my MOS, or occupational specialty. I agreed to go on the blind date that one of the guys in my unit put up for me because, let's face it, it was far more fun than waiting on base. Originally, Wendy's friend Pat and I were paired together by my friend Tony. But as it happened, Tony and Pat ended up getting along very well, so as Wendy and I got to know one another, he ended up living with her. Her beautiful face and long blonde hair immediately caught my attention. She smiled like she could launch a fleet of ships, and her eyes were the biggest blue eyes I had ever seen. It would be an understatement of the year to say I was in love. We got to know one another throughout the course of the evening and discovered we had a lot in common. We were both in the military. I was in the Marines, she was in the Navy, and she was a corpsman, which is the Navy's term for a medic, at the Naval Hospital in Balboa. In addition to sharing many other interests, we both enjoyed the same movies and music. I knew I was going to marry this woman before the night was up. After a few months of dating, we gradually drifted apart. We stopped regularly seeing each other because, as she told me, she was concerned that we were becoming too close. After a period of heartbreak, I met Marcy, the woman who would eventually become my first wife. Was that ever incorrect? Marcy was pleasant, friendly, and enjoyable to be around at first, but it seemed like the mask fell off the moment we got married, and I started waking up next to the shrew from hell. Before I discovered her having an affair with a boy from her high school, we had not even been married for a year. We were supposed to stay away for a full week while my unit was in the field receiving training, but we ended a day early. Though I was supposed to be the one shocked, I was actually looking forward to surprising Marcy when I came home. As soon as I entered the modest apartment we shared off base, I could hear them. When I entered the bedroom, I saw a scraggly, long-haired, scrawny worm thumping desperately between her thighs. I kicked his butt all over the apartment and threw him out the door because I was so angry. When I returned to the bedroom to get Marcy, she squirmed beneath the blankets. "Please, Jeff, don't hit me," she pleaded. I gave a headshake. I was brought up to never hurt a woman, and even though I wanted to punch her in the face for cheating, I wasn't going to do that now. After lowering a few luggage, I threw them onto the bed. "Leave," I commanded her. She gathered her belongings and said, "Just pack your trash and get the hell out." "No," as I grabbed a beer and waited. After she was done, she exited into the living room, where I was sitting. "I apologize," she uttered. I pointed at the door without saying anything. After phoning her parents, they arrived to collect her. I informed her father, who was a Marine as well, about what I had entered. He gave a headshake. "Jeff, I apologize," he said. They hauled her away, and happily I never saw her again. I thought we raised her better than that. My divorce was filed the following day. It shocked me when she accepted my demands and our union ended up as just another statistic. My unit was sent to Vietnam a few months after I filed for divorce, right before the Tet Offensive in February 1969. I wish I could claim I used the jawbone to beat them all back, but I can't. In all honesty, it was me who suffered the beating. I was wounded in the belly by one enemy bullet and my upper left leg was ripped apart by another. My leg was saved, but they informed me that I would need physical treatment for a while. In the end, I had multiple surgeries to repair the damage to my stomach. I was eventually sent to the United States and arrived at Balboa Naval Hospital. When I woke up the day after I got here, Wendy was standing over me. I initially believed I had passed on and entered paradise. Her initial words to me will always be with me. She smiled and said, "What are you doing in my hospital, Jeff Hammond? Is this a ploy to get me to go out with you or something?" "Can't blame a guy for trying," I replied. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that her white uniform had 2 chevrons, designating her as a petty officer, second class. "I see you made second class," I responded. She gave a head nod. Yes, she replied. And if I'm not mistaken, that means I outrank you, Corporal. I grinned. For the time being, I said. When I saw that she was not wearing a wedding band, I was mostly relieved. How are things with you? Have you met someone yet? No way, she replied. She smiled and added, I guess you kinda ruined me for anyone else. Now, Corporal, you need to get your rest. I hear they're going to start your physical therapy before too long. I said, will I see you again? She smiled mischievously at me and answered, Marine, you better believe it, she uttered. I couldn't help but smile broadly and said, I'm going to be watching you like a hawk. I had not heard such good news in a long time. After glancing around for a while, she gave me a cunning peck on the cheek. Take care of yourself, she advised. I'll check on you later. As promised, she stopped by around the time my meal was delivered to my room. She told me that her shift was about to end and she wanted to see me before heading home. While we ate the food on my tray, we chatted and sat together. I informed her about my unsuccessful marriage to Marcy when she asked. After silently listening, she took my head in her hands. She was a fool and an idiot, she remarked. We chatted until she was informed that visiting hours were over, to which I said, you deserve much better than that. Before she could leave the room, I stopped her. You know, I thought about you an awful lot over there in Nam, I said. Her face seemed melancholy for a time as she gazed at me. I've thought about you almost non-stop since our last date, she replied. She said, maybe if I hadn't pushed you away, but then her eyes started to well up with tears. She hurried out of the room while wiping her eyes. I wondered what all that was about. She didn't blame herself, surely, for my wounds. Over the following 6 months, I saw a lot of her. Even on her days off, she made an effort to stop by my room at least twice a day to see how I was doing. She frequently took me outdoors in a wheelchair so I could have a smoke. We talked about many topics for hours on end. She knew I liked to stare at her legs, so when she wasn't on duty, she would wear her shorts. As time passed, I became increasingly certain that I was in love with her. She seemed to be feeling the same way, but for some reason, she was hesitant. I chose to bring up the matter. I confided in her one day when we were outside. Her eyes were wet with tears as she said, oh, Jeff, I love you too. I said, then let's get married. She paused to look down before responding. She remarked, but you don't understand. What? I inquired. She shook her head and asked, is there someone else? She informed me, no, there never has been. I don't understand, I murmured. She declared, I can't have children. She revealed that she had been given a diagnosis of Turner syndrome, which, as I subsequently discovered, affects roughly 1 in 2,000 American-born women. This explained her very small stature and, according to her, had an adverse effect on her ovaries, making childbearing impossible. Even worse, she added, there's no remedy. She was obviously upset by this, but I told her that my love for her was unconditional. I hugged her close while she sobbed. But you deserve a complete woman, someone who can give you children, she continued. I stared her in the eyes while holding her face in my hands. I said, you are a complete woman. When the time comes, we can adopt, I informed her. There's lots of kids out there who needs a good mother. Hey, look at me. I was adopted, and I turned out all right. She grinned. She questioned, seriously, you were adopted? Yes, I replied. My birth parents were killed in a car accident when I was just 6. My aunt and uncle took me in and adopted me as their own. She said, you mean you'd let us adopt a child? Perhaps 2 kids, I remarked. She smiled and put her arms around my neck, saying, who knows? She said, Jeff Hammond, I love you. Wendy, I love you too, I affirmed. Now, will you marry me? Hell yes, she exclaimed as she planted several kisses on my face. I looked her in the eyes after a few minutes of fierce tongue wrestling and said, I'll be the best wife a man could ever want. Just curious, is this why you didn't want to date me before? I responded. Tears filled her eyes as she gazed at me. Yes, she mutely said. I was afraid you'd hate me if you knew the truth. I told her, I could never hate you. The truth is, I loved you the moment I first laid eyes on you. She questioned, really? Actually, I said. She encircled me with her arms and gave me another kiss, saying, in fact, I knew then we would get married. She added, I experienced the same thing myself. I was just too scared at the time. By the way, you should also know that I'm still a virgin. That frightened me. I assumed that a woman with her attractive appearance would have guys hammering down her door. I apologize, but that should have said Hatch. She was a Navy woman, after all. I said, seriously. She gave a head nod. Yes, she replied. I promised my parents before they died that I would save myself for my husband. And that's exactly what I did. Whoa, I exclaimed. Are you upset that I'm not a virgin? No, dude, she uttered. I gave her a smile and said, you'll just have to promise to go easy on me on our wedding night. I said, I swear. I eventually reached a stage where the service thought I could get by with a cane if I didn't put too much strain or weight on my injured left leg. My abdomen was missing a few bits, but other than that, the scars had healed. The Marine Corps, in its infinite wisdom, decided that I would be granted a medical discharge under honorable conditions, which entailed receiving a meager monthly pay because I was medically unfit to serve in battle. After talking with me about it, Wendy offered to let me stay in her apartment because her most recent roommate had gone to be sent to a different duty station. I agreed since I could not bear to be apart from her even for a day. In addition, our wedding was scheduled for January 1970, just a few months away. I took up residence in the second bedroom, which was previously occupied by her roommate, after moving in with her. Wendy was determined that we wouldn't share a bed until we were hitched. Although I really wanted to make love to her, I accepted her wishes despite how difficult it was. Even though I wasn't making nearly as much as I used to, things were tight. But Wendy showed herself to be incredibly organized, and she managed to make it work. She only requested for a small amount from me to help with the utility bills. I would gladly have done that for her. I called my parents in Wichita Falls, Texas, and broke the news to them. When they learned that Wendy and I were getting married, they were ecstatic and made a commitment to come out. Dad said that because my old truck had a manual transmission, I should get a new one. He wouldn't listen to me when I told him I couldn't afford the payments for a new one. He answered, "Call it a wedding present." He also advised me to phone the local bank where I had a savings account and make arrangements to have part of those cash moved to California. "We'll use it to bring all your stuff out and we'll fly back." We had an account with the base credit union when Marcy and I were married, but we canceled it and split the funds when we got divorced. I used my share of the money to start a new account with a civilian bank in town, and I still had money in it because that's where my checks had been put. It wasn't much in the big picture, but it would help bring us over the hill with the money I had stashed away in Texas. I needed something that paid real money since I knew I couldn't spend my days doing nothing in Wendy's apartment. But Wendy advised me to take advantage of the time to look into nearby universities and use my GI Bill to get my degree. She allowed me to borrow her car because I didn't have one, as long as I drove her to work and back. Luckily, her vehicle was an automatic. I looked into the nearby universities, and after talking to Wendy, I chose to pursue a degree in engineering. That worked out wonderfully, since classes would start around 3 weeks after our wedding. It was a done deal after I completed the required papers and arranged with the VA. Wendy and I tied the knot in a simple ceremony at a nearby chapel. My parents, who fell in love with Wendy, as well as many of her coworkers, came out to wish us luck. After the ceremony, we headed to a lovely hotel in Las Vegas that my dad had booked for us to stay at during our honeymoon. After a fun-filled trip to Las Vegas, we returned content and eager to begin our new lives together. Although finances were rather tight for the first 4 years, Wendy was able to stretch every dollar, and we were always able to make ends meet month after month. In late 1970, she re-enlisted for a 4-year term to allow me to complete my college education. She saw it as an investment in our lives together. Additionally, she converted the previous guest room into an office, providing me with a quiet and peaceful space to study. She managed to cobble together enough cash from a nearby thrift shop to purchase an old desk and some bookshelves. After that, she arranged for their delivery to the apartment and had them refinished to match. They appeared to have cost a small fortune when she was done. The bookcases and desk are still with me, and they still look just as good as they did when Mom originally acquired them. Whenever I would sit down to study in my office, Wendy would often play her violin or piano for us to enjoy. I enjoyed hearing Mom perform, and occasionally I would get out my mountain dulcimer or my grandfather's old guitar to join in. We were never really that talented, but we always had a fantastic time, and the musical interludes in the master bedroom eventually developed into foreplay. We were careful to save enough money in those early years so that we could go on dates at least twice a month. I caught a glimpse of my wife's other side during one of those outings. Wendy has always struck me as the most attractive girl in the world. I found out that some other men, who worked at the same hospital as her, also seemed to think the same thing. One of them just so happened to be at a club that Wendy and I occasionally enjoyed going to. I could only dance slow dances because of the way my leg was shaped. I couldn't dance for very long at a time. It was never going to happen, so forget all that hopping around crap. Conversely, Wendy enjoyed dancing quickly and was frequently invited to dance by other men in the club. She always asked before she did, and I generally said yes after giving the guy who was requesting her the cold shoulder. As they danced, I watched what he was doing too. While I trusted Wendy, I wasn't so sure about some of the guys that approached her for a dance. Without so much as a by your leave to me, this guy approached our table one evening and struck up a conversation with my wife. Wendy saw through the insult and told him that I was her spouse when she introduced us. He shook my hand and remarked, "Good to meet you," with trepidation. I looked at Wendy and could tell she wanted to dance, so I nodded my head. "So, you mind if I have a dance with your wife?" He made multiple attempts to grab her as they danced, but she consistently retreated from his advances. I noticed the noise from the dance floor when I took a sip of my beer. He was on the floor, staring up at her when I looked up. Enraged, she stood over him. The people in their immediate vicinity paused to see the exchange between them. Grabbing my cane, I made my way over to them. "Please never touch me in that way again." She said, "I'm okay now," and I gave her a nod. "Maybe we'd better get going," I replied. She answered, "Yes, let's get out of here," and we returned to the table to gather our belongings before making our way to the vehicle. What was the purpose of that? When we got in the car, I asked her. She apologized, saying, "He works at the hospital. I suppose he felt he had the right to move in on me because I had dated him a few times before we were together." What transpired on the dance floor? I inquired. He put his hand on me, so I kneed him in the balls, she explained. It's a move I learned from an old master chief years ago. I answered, well, kneeing him in the balls was a brilliant move. By the way, what did he mean when he called me a cuck? The way he talks to any man who's with a lady he desires, she added. He's a trash who thinks he's God's gift to women. I've never betrayed you and I will never do so again. You must be aware of that. All right, case closed, I replied. Good move, by the way. The truth is, I knew she was right. I saw him around the hospital and observed his interactions with other women. I was genuinely shocked that he hadn't been fired for the way he approached the married nurses. I also knew Wendy's reputation at the hospital. If ever a straight shooter was needed, Wendy was it. I appreciate how you handled the cane, placing it so close to his throat. Could you have truly severed his testicles? I chuckled as she asked. It seems like you'd rather not find out. It was her turn to giggle as I questioned. Not really, she answered, but knowing that you're on my side is comforting. Take me home now, please, and make love to me. With a yes, ma'am, I made my way to the house. Wendy was there to congratulate me on receiving my bachelor's degree in 1974. I went on to work for a local aerospace company and continue to do so, but I plan to retire shortly. I wanted to do something special for Wendy because she had always been such a support system and I wanted to finally be able to help her out. When I showed her the tickets, her eyes widened, so I took the sign-on bonus I had received plus the remaining money I had in Texas and made a 5-day reservation in Hawaii. She took time off work and we traveled. She shocked me on the way there by whispering in my ear as she leaned over, I'm going to play with you when we get to the hotel. We spent the entire night together, barefoot save for meals, making love to one another before eventually nodding off in each other's arms early in the morning. We had a great rest of the week and even shared a daylight kiss on a remote beach. All wonderful things eventually have to end, and this vacation was no exception. Rejuvenated and relaxed, we took a plane back home. Despite our dislike of leaving Hawaii, we vowed to return someday. Wendy made the decision to enter the Naval Reserves after her enlistment expired later that year. She didn't want to see her 8 years of experience go to waste because at that point she had been promoted to Petty Officer First Class. She accepted an offer to work at Scripps Memorial Hospital after receiving it. After deciding it was time to buy a house 6 months later, we looked for a 2-story, 4-bedroom home that met all of our needs. I found the steps to be a little difficult, but since Wendy cherished the location so much, I deemed it to be a small annoyance. About half a year later, we began discussing the possibility of adopting a kid. We contacted a number of organizations, spoke with them, and were given an overview of the procedure along with pictures of adoptable kids. Observing these kids in need of adoption was rather distressing. A set of 8-month-old twins named Michael and Michelle, who were presently living in a foster home with numerous other kids, immediately won our hearts. After initiating the procedure and clearing all the formalities, we were able to officially become the parents of Michael and Michelle, 2 adorable kids who captured our hearts from the moment we laid eyes on them. Wendy adapted to her new job as mother quickly, despite her initial fear. And for my part, I was ecstatic. What was there not to be happy about? I had 2 lovely children and a nice wife. Yes, we had to change our lifestyles to make room for the kids, but that's nothing new for new parents. The kids required some schedule adjustments, but we didn't want to put them in daycare. After examining our spending plan, we concluded that hiring a part-time nanny to watch kids while we were at work was within our means. Wendy was sobbing in our bedroom when I found her there one day. I said, "What's wrong, sweetie?" "I was called mama by the kids," she remarked. I said, "That's a good thing, isn't it?" She sobbed on my shoulder and nodded her head. "That's right," she replied. With a tearful expression on my cheek, I clutched her and said, "I just never thought I would ever hear anyone call me that." I was aware of her significance for this. Michael began participating in sports at a young age and developed into quite the athlete. I had a great time watching him play Little League and taking him there. After watching him play, the rest of us would go out for pizza or burgers. Michelle longed to play the piano, just like Wendy had. We thus paid for her classes and went to her performances. I used to like hearing the 2 of them perform duets on Wendy's piano, which was a focal point of the living area. We got Michael a guitar and paid for tuition once he made the decision he wanted to learn how to play. Wendy knew how much I liked bluegrass and decided about the same time that I needed to expand my musical horizons. She gave me a lovely Gibson banjo. I took up playing the instrument and enjoyed learning. After about a year, I discovered that I could really play a halfway decent tune on it. We had started a family band by then, and we would frequently jam in the living room. I will always remember the day I played dueling banjos with Michael at a neighborhood picnic. As we played, everyone was clapping and stomping their feet by the time we were finished. As everyone applauded us, Michael and I gave each other a high five after we were done. I was unaware that Wendy had videotaped the entire incident. With all of its highs and lows, life continued. Overall, we had a terrific time. Like any family, we occasionally had small arguments, but we always worked things out. Wendy was given a thyroid cancer diagnosis in 1986. I was concerned and questioned whether it had anything to do with her Turner syndrome, even though she reassured me that it was a fairly common and manageable illness. She made it through absolutely well, as she had promised, but she now had to take medication for her thyroid on a daily basis. When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait 4 years later, Wendy was ordered into active duty and posted to a hospital ship headquartered in San Diego along with many other members of her reserve unit. She had recently been elevated to the rank of Senior Chief Petty Officer. She reassured us that hers was not a combat position and that attacking a hospital ship was considered a war crime. Having been in combat, I was understandably anxious for her well-being, and the children were scared as well. When the kids and I brought her to the ship that August 1990, it was a heartbreaking farewell. She hugged and kissed each of us and said she would try to contact us as much as possible. I watched her sail off to battle with tears welling up in the eyes of the kids. She called whenever she had a chance and fulfilled her promise. She called us from the ship roughly twice a month to check on her well-being, and we exchanged letters at least 3 times per week. The worst aspect of the whole process, though, was the holiday season. Despite how much the kids and I missed her, we managed to get through it. We even played her a Christmas song while she was on the phone, and she called on Thanksgiving and Christmas. But without her, it just wasn't the same. In mid-March 1991, at last, we received word that the ship was leaving the area of operation and would be returning to Oakland in April. The news made us all jump with excitement. I drove to Oakland with the kids to pick her up when the time came. When she came off the ship, we showered her with hugs and kisses, and I could tell she was glad to be home. I'm not sure if the kids noticed, but I thought she was odd in some way. Having been in war, I reasoned that perhaps she was simply feeling a little worn out from her ordeal. However, after a few weeks, I became aware of another issue. She appeared perpetually fatigued and found it difficult to endure the day. She would get exhausted from little chores, and I would often find her gasping for air. I took the day off to spend with her and eventually got her to visit a doctor. The doctor examined her and advised that she consult a cardiologist. After a few 30 seconds of using a stethoscope to listen to her heart, he informed us that she required immediate surgery. Over the years, it was discovered that what other doctors had just written off as a heart murmur was actually far worse. Her aortic valve needed to be replaced as it was malfunctioning. In the end, they replaced her valve with a mechanical one, which the specialist predicted would live longer than she would. In order to maintain her blood thinness, they also started her on Coumadin. After that, she recovered considerably, but hearing her valve click at night while nobody else was home was a little unsettling. We both understood that she was most likely suffering from Turner syndrome when, a few months later, she began to exhibit some menopausal symptoms. Her joints hurt constantly, and she went through a lot of crazy mood swings. She may be joyful and carefree one moment, and then cry for no apparent cause at all. She would be upset with the world for almost nothing a second later. Her desire, of course, vanished almost as quickly as our physical existence. After doing what he could, her doctor recommended that she have a hysterectomy. She spent 5 days in the hospital after consenting to the operation. After that, she made significant progress, but things were never quite the same. Our physical lives essentially vanished, but our love for one another never wavered. We made several attempts. Life continued, and in 1993 the kids received their high school diplomas. Michelle was accepted to UCLA with the aim of becoming a doctor someday, while Michael was given a date to attend the Naval Academy in Annapolis. Wendy and I said them goodbye with tears in our eyes as they went on with their lives. We then became empty nesters in our own lives. We talked about selling the house and downsizing, but after considering the escalating expense of housing, we decided against it. Furthermore, we believed that one day we might be entertaining grandkids, as we had many pleasant memories of the home in which we reared our children. Thus, we continued on from our current location. After a few years, Wendy decided to retire from the Navy Reserves after realizing she had accumulated enough points. She continued working at Scripps, immersing herself in her task. The words no married man ever likes to hear, yet Wendy spoke to me one night. "We need to talk." I inquired, "What's the matter?" "Before you say anything, I want you to please hear me out completely," she replied. I murmured, "Okay," growing uneasy. Was she planning to make a divorce request of me? What was going through her mind was unknown to me. "Promise me you won't get mad or anything, okay?" she said. Though I refrained from speaking, I was starting to become irritated. "Wendy, just talk to me," I pleaded. "What's going on?" "I know the last few years have been hard," she replied. "It's been hard on both of us. And I know it's been a long time since we've been able to do anything, in bed. I don't blame you, not at all. It's me. It's all my fault." "No, it's not your fault that you had to undergo surgery," I said. She sobbed, "But I can't satisfy you anymore. And it's not right for you to have to go without bonding because I can't do it anymore." I questioned, "What are you suggesting?" "Maybe you should find another woman and have slept with her," she replied. "What?" I inquired. "Do you want a divorce or something?" "Oh my God, no," she exclaimed. "I love you with all my heart. I just want you to be happy, and if sleeping with another woman is what it takes, then I'm prepared to let you do it." "You want me to cheat on you?" I questioned, surprised that she would even consider it, especially in light of my previous experiences with Marcy. She gave a head shake. No, I don't, she responded. It wouldn't be cheating, anyway. Not really. You'd have my permission and you wouldn't be sneaking around on me. Besides, it's just bonding. It was my turn to nod my agreement. No, sweetheart, I replied. I'm not going to do it, with or without your permission. I took a vow to you in front of God and witnesses to love, honor, and cherish you in good times and bad, through sickness and health. On top of that, I promise to forsake all others until death do us part. I'm not breaking those vows, she added, but I can't satisfy you anymore, as tears streamed down her cheeks. It's not fair. You deserve to be happy. But I'm delighted, I said to her. Every minute I get to spend with you makes me happy. Weeping, she questioned, how can you be happy with me? It is no longer possible for me to make you happy. I'm not good enough. I'm ugly and scarred. How on earth are you able to look at me? She sobbed after losing it. I never said it, even though I knew that her zipper made her feel less attractive. She sobbed on my shoulder as I rocked her and kept her close to me. You're not a failure, I informed her. You're also not unattractive. You are the most stunning woman I have ever laid eyes on, and I would be delighted to exchange scars with you. You should never say it to me again. You've raised 2 amazing children and you've made me the happiest guy alive. All the while supporting your nation and working. Any man could ever wish for a better wife and mother than you. Never say to me that you're not a success. You are. I assure you that there are many women that are far inferior to you. I'm sorry, she sobbed. All I want is for you to be content. You're worthy of that. I told her, and you really do make me happy. Listen, let's make an appointment with the doctor and see what can be done, okay? She declared, I don't want to see another doctor, and I'm tired of taking pills. That was something I could understand. I comprehend, I replied to her, but finding out won't do any harm. Kindly schedule an appointment with the doctor over the phone tomorrow. Make a vow to me. She gave a head nod. All right, she replied. I will. The following day, she gave a call and scheduled a meeting for later in the week. I accompanied her after taking a comp day off. The physician and I both paid attention as she described the situation. He waited for her to finish talking while taking notes. Then, before he spoke, he checked her chart. I see you were on hormones before your hysterectomy, he replied. Are you still taking those? Wendy gave a head shake. They took me off of them and said I wouldn't need them anymore, she stated. He gave a head nod. I see it's also been a while since we've checked your thyroid, remarked the doctor. First, let's see what we have to deal with by getting some blood testing done. I also want to assess your glucose level because of your past. I understand that my office will contact you in a day or two, and then we can proceed. All right, she replied. A nurse entered the room after the doctor had departed and drew several vials of blood. We stopped for a brief bite to eat before heading home. Some days later, there was a call from the doctor's office. Her thyroid was one of the off levels, so the doctor phoned in a fresh prescription. Her blood sugar levels were also higher than normal, so he diagnosed her with diabetes, not severe enough to need medicine. His goal was to determine whether food might be used to manage it. I wasn't surprised by that. I had begun researching Turner syndrome online, and several sources indicated that women with the syndrome frequently had diabetes. In addition, I took note of the symptoms and discovered that Wendy had experienced several of them throughout the years. In addition, the doctor scheduled her to see his nutritionist and recommended a new hormone medication. In addition, he asked her to return for a follow-up in 30 days. I took her new medications and made plans for another day off so we could go see the nutritionist together. In addition to wanting to keep myself from getting diabetes, I intended to follow the diet alongside her. Her new regimen wasn't immediately apparent, but it was well worth the wait. Wendy felt much better and was practically her former self again. Wendy met me in the bedroom, all smiles, about a week after I started the new diet and medications. I hadn't seen this in a long time. You want to play? She rolled off of me and said, I'm sorry, babe, but I'm starting to get a bit sore. That's okay, I comforted her while embracing her. No need to apologize. I'm so glad you didn't take me up on my stupid offer, she said. Yes, I am, I replied. You have my permission to kick my bottom if I ever mention that again, she said. I may just take you up on that, I said. She grabbed me and laughed. This guy is mine, she declared. Totally mine, and it will never belong to anyone else. I said, damn straight, to her. She said, I love you so much, and then planted a passionate kiss on me. I said, I love you more, after we shared a kiss. It was wonderful to see the old Wendy again. Our physical condition significantly improved. It was incredibly satisfying, even though we weren't nearly as active as we had been when we first got married. After earning her bachelor's degree in 1997, Michelle readied herself for the subsequent phase of her study. The three of us traveled to Annapolis to see Michael's graduation as a newly commissioned ensign from the Naval Academy after we had witnessed her obtain her diploma. He introduced us to several of his classmates after the ceremony, and several of them thanked Wendy and me for our assistance. We acknowledged their appreciation and gave them praise for their accomplishments. I then asked Michael what he was going to do. He declared, I'm going for jets. You're going to be a pilot. I questioned him. With pride, he informed me that he intended to become a naval aviator. We returned home after celebrating our kids' graduations, and Michelle spent the summer with us before she had to return to school. Her schooling was not yet complete. She still needed to complete her residency and 4 more years of medical school. For the next 2 decades, Wendy struggled with a series of health issues. She eventually had cataracts and needed surgery to replace her lenses. When medical professionals discovered an aortic aneurysm in 2005, she underwent yet another heart operation to replace it. During her visit, the physician determined that he would need to swap out her mechanical valve for a pig valve, which he assured her would last the remainder of her life. Over the next 15 years, she had to struggle with one persistent medical issue after another. A lump in her front was discovered at one point, and a biopsy was performed. Thankfully, the cause was not cancer. Her liver was the first organ the doctors worried about, followed by her kidneys and, briefly, her heart. We were lucky to have adequate insurance that paid for everything, otherwise, we would have gone bankrupt. I seem to recall reading that a lot of this might be related to her Turner syndrome, which might shorten her life by up to 13 years based on what I observed. I was thankful she was still with me at this point and tried to spend as much time as possible with her. I wasn't too worried about bonding, or the lack of it, at that point. It was enough to have her in my arms alone. After a few years of quiet retirement from scripts, she lived at home. Both of the children were married by then. Having recently attained the rank of commander, Michael was now leading a fighter squadron attached to an aircraft carrier. He had 2 children now with his wonderful wife, whom he had met in Maryland. Michelle completed her residency and made the decision to enlist in the Navy to work as a certified physician. She was a lieutenant commander by now, assigned to the same hospital where Wendy had spent the most of her career, Balboa Naval Hospital. She too was married, but after discovering her spouse was having an affair with a nurse, she gave him the boot and a well-earned kick to the balls. She started dating another doctor after her divorce, but their relationship wasn't committed. Then it took place. Wendy had been having trouble breathing and swallowing for a while. It got to the point where she needed her head up in order to fall asleep. She woke me up one night in October 2019 in a panic. She was obviously having trouble breathing, so I tried to calm her down. She was clearly in pain, and nothing seemed to be helping. I thus dialed 911. She was taken to the emergency department by the ambulance, which arrived quickly. As they rolled her into the exam room, I ran in behind. While I was taking care of the papers, they examined her. I felt like an old hand at this by now because I had gone through this numerous times. The doctor eventually appeared to tell me that they had discovered a lump in the back of her throat preventing her from breathing normally, after what felt like an eternity of waiting. She was placed on a breathing apparatus and a sample of the mass was taken in order to identify its nature. When I wanted to visit her, they told she was under sedation at the time. I waited as a result, and held out, and waited some more. I sat waiting to be told something and drank cup after cup of terrible coffee. I had to use the head multiple times because I drank so much coffee. I even passed out for a little while I awaited their explanation of the situation. The doctor eventually emerged and dragged me into a small conference room for a private conversation. At that point, he told me the tumor looked like cancer and they were getting her ready for an emergency surgery to remove it so she could breathe. He also told me that they were still doing analysis on it to find out if the tumor was cancerous. He said it might take a while to do the procedure, so I should go home and give the nurse my mobile phone number so I can be notified when they're done. I left my cell number and took his advice, leaving and going home. Though tired, I was nervous. My boss instructed me to take whatever time I needed when I called into work when I got home to let them know what was going on. I passed off on the couch and slept terribly until my phone started to ring a few hours later. I was shown to the recovery area when I arrived at the hospital, told to wait while her room was being ready. A doctor came out to tell me that the cancer had been verified while I was waiting. Despite the fact that the cancer was quite aggressive, they were confident that chemotherapy could be used to treat it. I visited her after signing the necessary paperwork to begin her treatment. Seeing her in that hospital bed destroyed my heart. Despite her tired and haggard appearance, she forced a bold smile. I kissed her cheek and took her hand in mine. "Did the doctor talk to you yet?" I inquired. She gave a head nod. "Are you going to be okay?" "Yeah," she mumbled. "I'm just worried about you." "It's okay, sweetie," I assured her. "I am in this location. I have no plans to leave." When at last she fell asleep, we sat there holding hands. The doctor told me they were going to keep her for a few days while they set her up for chemotherapy, so I kissed her on the forehead and left for home. My boss allowed me to take as much time as I wanted, understanding the circumstances. I took use of my ample vacation, sick, and comp time to make the required adjustments to the house so she wouldn't have to climb the stairs while weak. The following 3 months weren't easy. Luckily, Michael's wife Jennifer prepared the holiday meals with Michelle's assistance, and the kids visited for the holidays. At this point, Michael was leading a carrier air group as a captain in the Navy. In order for them to be with us for Christmas and Thanksgiving, he took ample time off. I tried to spend as much time as possible with the grandchildren with Wendy. Her illnesses were detected by the doctors shortly after Christmas. As soon as they decided on a course of action, they immediately stopped the chemotherapy. The rest is known to you. The kids were indeed a blessing. They handled Wendy's last-minute arrangements and assisted me in setting up the funeral. During this time, we all sobbed on each other's shoulders. 2 months had passed after the funeral when I made the decision to go through what was left of Wendy. By then, nearly everything else had been donated to Goodwill or given away per her wishes. I reasoned that because everyone was under lockdown because of this awful coronavirus, now would be an excellent moment to tackle it. Entering the bedroom, I took a closer look at the big hope chest that spanned the length of our bed. Using the table saw and router she had given me as a housewarming gift, I had constructed it for her 45 years ago when we first moved into the house. I'd never opened it before, so I had no idea what Mom kept in there. When I asked her what she did with it, she would just smile sweetly and tell me that it was a place where she kept her favorite memories. Whatever the meaning of that was, I assumed that she had some trinkets or items that had been passed down to her through the years. A part of me thought I was violating her privacy when I opened the chest. I peered inside, curious to see what I would discover. On top was an envelope with my address on it. I took a moment to put everything aside and examined what she had inserted into the chest. I opened up numerous notebooks that I had found. Every drawing the kids and grandkids had ever made, Wendy had preserved and carefully placed within sheet protectors. Not only that, but she had saved every card, letter, and note we had ever sent her. I discovered that she had preserved every card and letter I had sent her over the years among the numerous bundles of correspondence between the three of us. She also preserved hair strands from the kids she had gathered over the years. I also discovered a ton of family-related movies Mom had edited together, one of which was a recording of Michael and myself playing dueling banjos at the barbecue. I made the decision to duplicate them for the children. I took out a handwritten note from the letter after I opened it. Her handwriting wasn't as neat as it formerly was, so I could tell this was rather recently. "My darling Jeff," it said at the start. "I wanted to get this off my chest while I still could since I'm not sure if I'm going to survive this operation or not. You have given me the most joy over the past 50 years, and all I can hope for is that I have returned the favor. Don't cry for me, please. I've reconciled with God, and I'm ready to see my Creator guilt-free. You're the only man I've ever dated in our 50 years together, and I know you've also been faithful. Additionally, I am aware of your ongoing requirements. So please locate a companion who will bring you joy as you age. I only ask that you swear to keep me in mind occasionally. I'll be waiting for our reunion day here in heaven. To your loving wife, Wendy, forever," the note said. I read that note 3 times, tears streaming down my cheeks, knowing it would be the final note I would ever read from her. I replaced her memories in the chest and tucked the note back into the envelope. I shut the chest and made the decision to leave it locked and closed going forward. I wondered whether she could see me as I raised my head to the ceiling. I softly said, "I love you, Wendy," into the space. "And I will always do. Nobody could ever be able to take your place as the greatest wife ever." My comment, "A true loving wife and husband story. Thank you for writing this and would give it a 30 if possible. It shows that two people who truly love each other and have a marriage that is what it is supposed to be. Unfortunately, it is not common these days owing to the selfishness of one or both partners.